My name is Maddie Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I thought I had everything figured out. A flourishing career as a project manager in luxury real estate in Chicago, a cozy apartment in West Loop I could call my own, and a fiancé who promised forever. His name was Brandon Green, charming, handsome, and the kind of guy who could speak about healing and spirituality with such conviction. You almost believed the world was perfect. At least, that's what I told myself. We met almost 4 years ago at a networking event. He was that magnetic presence, the life coach who had just started to gain a following on social media, preaching self-love and emotional awakening. I was skeptical at first, but Brandon had a way of making you feel seen, really seen. In a world where everyone's attention was so fractured. Fast forward 3 years, and I was standing on the shore of Lake Michigan, the golden sun casting a soft glow, as he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. It was the kind of moment you see in movies, where the world hushes and everything slows down. I remember the sharp intake of breath, the smile trembling on his lips, the joy flooding my chest so intensely I thought I might burst. I said yes without hesitation. But dreams don't always turn into reality. The months leading up to the wedding should have been the happiest time of my life. Instead, I found myself caught in a storm of doubt, tension, and quiet warnings from those closest to me. Joe, my cousin and maid of honor, noticed Brandon's increasing secrecy. Kyle, my younger brother, who was planning the wedding with me, expressed concern that Brandon was distant, not the man I thought I knew. It started small. Brandon would be late returning my texts, brushing off conversations about wedding plans, and spending hours on calls with the spiritual advisor I'd never met. Then came the whispers from friends, from people in his circle about his questionable past, and a life that wasn't quite as clean as his Instagram suggested. I tried to push it all aside, because when you're in love, you want to believe the best in people. I wanted to believe Brandon was just overwhelmed, that his spiritual journey was genuine, and that soon, everything would be perfect. I ignored the gnawing feeling that maybe, just maybe, I was being played. 3 days before our wedding, the cracks shattered completely. That night, Brandon didn't come home. I waited, hours twisting into silence, when he finally texted. It wasn't an apology, it was an explanation laced with confusion and defensiveness about needing space, about finding himself, about how I was too controlling. I confronted him the next day. Our argument spiraled out of control, voices raised in a tangle of accusations and hurt. He told me to postpone the wedding to test if we were truly meant to be. I apologized, desperate to hold on, but deep down I was breaking. Then, silence. Brandon disappeared for 5 days. No calls, no messages, no signs of the man who once promised to stand by me through everything. The world I had built began to crumble. I tried to keep going, to carry on with plans, but every invitation, every vendor confirmation felt like a cruel reminder of the fragility of trust. Then came the day. I woke up that morning with a strange mix of hope and dread. The sun streamed through the curtains of our shared apartment, casting warm light on the scattered wedding invitations and floral arrangements. Joe was already there, calm and collected, putting the finishing touches on my makeup. Kyle was setting up decorations, his usual humor a thin veil over his concern. The venue was booked, the guests were arriving, and for a brief moment, I dared to imagine the day unfolding as I had dreamed. The church doors opened, and Brandon walked in, immaculately dressed, his smile practiced, but somehow hollow. He took my hand at the altar. The minister's words about love and commitment echoed around us, but my mind was elsewhere. Flickers of doubt danced behind Brandon's eyes, and I clung to the hope that it was just nerves. Then, the moment the world stopped, the church doors burst open again. A man I didn't recognize stepped in with a confidence that demanded attention. Brandon's ex-lover. Someone I had only heard whispered about in vague rumors. The air turned thick with tension. The man's voice rang out, cutting through the silence. Brandon, I know you still love me. That night 3 days ago was real. Come with me. Brandon's face paled. I felt my grip on his hand weaken, then slip entirely. The bouquet I held tumbled to the floor. Without a word, he followed the man, leaving me standing alone as hundreds of eyes that fixed on me, on us. My mother's sobs filled the pews. My brother's jaw clenched. Joe's face was pale, stunned. I was humiliated, betrayed, abandoned, but most of all, utterly shattered. That day, I realized something painful yet powerful. Sometimes the person you trust the most is the one who will hurt you the deepest. As I walked out of the church alone, the bouquet crushed beneath my heel. My heart broke in a way words could never capture. But beneath that pain stirred something new, a fierce determination to reclaim my story. Because this was not the end. What happened next changed everything. How do you fight back when the world watches your darkest moment? How do you rebuild when betrayal becomes a public spectacle? Stay with me because the real story is just beginning. The morning of the wedding was surreal. The city of Chicago woke up cold and clear, the sun piercing through the skyscrapers like golden arrows. I woke with a jittery mix of anxiety and exhaustion, my body refusing to believe this was really happening. Months of planning, dreams, and promises came down to these hours. Joe, my cousin and maid of honor, was already bustling around the apartment, making sure every detail was perfect. My dress steamed, makeup flawless, hair curling just so. Kyle, my brother, was pacing nervously, making last-minute calls to vendors, his usual humor replaced by tight smiles and clenching fists. Brandon was silent, distant. There was an edge to his smile, a hollow ring to his laughter when it came. But no one outside of me could see the undercurrents beneath the polished surface. Guests were arriving, buzzing with excitement. Friends hugged, old relatives smiled. Everyone expected a perfect day. I held Brandon's hand as we entered the church. The music swelled, and the sun streamed through stained glass windows, painting the altar with shards of color. The minister began the ceremony, his words warm and comforting, speaking of love's endurance and sacred vows. My heart beat fast, trying to drown out the doubts that whispered, "Is this really the man who promised forever?" The crowd's eyes were on us, waiting for the moment I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. The words, "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" felt like a lifetime. I looked at Brandon. His eyes flickered, hesitation barely concealed behind a practiced smile. Then the church doors slammed open with a force that stole the breath from everyone's lungs. The man who stepped in wasn't part of the guest list. His presence was an electric shock, tall, confident, wearing a dark tailored suit that made him look like he belonged in a movie, not a church. His gaze locked on Brandon as if challenging a silent bet. I recognized him immediately. Ethan, Brandon's ex-lover from years ago. The room held its breath. The minister faltered mid-phrase. The music stopped dead. Ethan walked slowly down the aisle, his voice calm but cutting through the heavy silence. "Brandon, that night 3 days ago wasn't a mistake. We know the truth, and so do you." His eyes never left Brandon's, burning with an intensity that made the whole room uncomfortable. Brandon's hand twitched in mine. I felt the warmth drain from his fingers. The crowd watched as Brandon's carefully constructed facade crumbled. His voice trembled. "Ethan, please, this isn't the time or place." But the words rang hollow. His own betrayal laid bare in front of hundreds. He let go of my hand. My bouquet slipped from my grasp, tumbling down, petals scattering like forgotten promises. Brandon took a step back, then another, until he was following Ethan, moving as though pulled by an invisible thread. I was left standing at the altar alone. The weight of every gaze in the church pressed down on me. Mothers gasped. Some guests whispered. A few held their breath in shock. My mother's sobs pierced the silence, her hands trembling on the pew. Kyle's jaw clenched, fists balled at his sides, but he made no move to intervene. Jo stood frozen, her face pale as she stared at me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The sting of humiliation burned hot and raw, but beneath it, something else stirred, a flicker of defiance, a refusal to be broken by the spectacle. As they disappeared through the back doors, the world shifted beneath my feet. Outside, the hum of the city seemed distant, as if it didn't belong to me anymore. I was no longer Maddie Carter, the woman about to be married. I was Maddie Carter, the woman who had been abandoned publicly and irrevocably. For the rest of the day, I moved through a fog. Calls poured in, texts, messages, emails from friends, family, colleagues. Some words offered comfort, others carried venom disguised as sympathy. I deleted nearly all of them. I needed space. I needed to breathe. Jo stayed by my side, helping me through the motions, sending apologies to vendors, dealing with the venue, managing the guests who were still milling about in confusion. Kyle arranged for a car to take me home. His usual jovial nature replaced by a protective seriousness I hadn't seen before. When the front door of my apartment shut behind me, the floodgates broke. I collapsed onto the couch, the silence screaming in my ears. The bouquet lay crushed on the floor beside me, a vivid symbol of shattered dreams. Tears came unbidden, a torrent of pain, betrayal, and disbelief. How could someone I trusted so completely hurt me like this? How could he betray not only me, but the vows we were about to make in front of everyone we loved? The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a public spectacle, a broadcast of my deepest humiliation to 100 pairs of eyes. And the pain was raw, unbearable. I tried to remember the man Brandon was before all this, the man who held me gently, who spoke of forever and promise. But now, that memory felt like a cruel joke. That night, sleep evaded me. My mind spun with 1,000 questions. What did I miss? Was there something I didn't see? Could I have stopped this? But beneath the questions was an ember, a flicker of determination. I would not be a victim of this story. Because sometimes, when everything falls apart, you have to build yourself back stronger. But the story wasn't over. What happened next would change everything, turning my personal nightmare into a public drama no one could ignore. How do you fight back when the whole world is watching your darkest moment? How do you reclaim your life from the ashes of betrayal? The morning after the wedding disaster, I woke up to a world I no longer recognized. My phone was buzzing nonstop, texts, missed calls, notifications piling up like a relentless storm, friends checking in, strangers offering condolences, gossip swirling faster than I could keep up. But it wasn't just personal messages, it was the floodgates of social media opening wide. Jo, my cousin and maid of honor, had recorded the entire moment when Brandon left me at the altar. What was meant to be a private memento of a day I wanted to forget had become the most watched clip on TikTok by noon. The video, tagged Runaway Groom, showed Brandon's hesitation, the sudden intrusion of Ethan, the heartbreak etched on my face as the bouquet fell, and finally Brandon's retreat down the aisle with his ex-lover. It was raw, unfiltered, and brutally viral. Within hours, the clip exploded. Millions watched, shared, and commented. Some sent support, but many ridiculed, mocked, And judged, they made memes out of my pain, turning my worst moment into internet entertainment. The comments ranged from sympathy to cruelty, and somewhere in that digital chaos, my heartbreak was commodified. I shut off my phone, trying to shield myself from the barrage, but the damage was done. At work, colleagues whispered behind my back, vendors called to cancel contracts, prospective clients hesitated. The hashtag trailed me everywhere on LinkedIn, Instagram, even in emails. My professional reputation was crumbling alongside my personal life. Yet amid this public chaos, a few key allies emerged. Joe, guilt-ridden yet unwavering, became my voice online, answering messages, setting the record straight. Kyle took over managing my social media presence, filtering out toxicity and creating a narrative of strength and survival. Rachel, my old college friend and a lawyer, stepped in to handle the legal fallout, advising on canceling contracts, protecting my assets, and navigating the messy aftermath. Despite their help, the loneliness was suffocating. I often sat alone in the dim glow of my apartment, replaying the moment over and over. The betrayal wasn't just about Brandon's infidelity. It was the timing, the public spectacle, the way he shattered my trust in front of everyone I cared about. My mind was a tempest of anger, grief, confusion, and disbelief. But slowly, beneath the wreckage, determination grew. I refused to be defined by that one catastrophic moment. I began to write a blog, initially for myself, to process the trauma. But soon, it gained readers, women and men reaching out with stories of their own betrayals, their own shattered dreams. My pain was no longer mine alone. It became a collective voice of resilience. As the weeks passed, Brandon's public image crumbled too. Investigations into his past revealed a pattern of emotional manipulation, false promises, and broken trust. Former clients spoke out, exposing his charades and lies. His lucrative coaching contracts evaporated. The man who once preached spiritual healing became the very definition of hypocrisy. Still, the battle was far from over. Brandon resurfaced one bleak evening, standing at my doorstep disheveled, pleading, broken. He claimed regret, spoke of lessons learned, begged for forgiveness, but I saw through the facade. His return wasn't about love. It was desperation, a bid for control. I faced him with cold clarity. If I were your only option, would you even be here? I asked, watching him falter. The silence that followed was louder than any apology. Closing the door behind him, I realized that reclaiming my life wouldn't be easy. It would be a long fight, not just against him, but against the ghosts of betrayal, the shadows of public scrutiny, and the scars etched deep within. Yet in that moment, I understood true power comes not from revenge, but from rising stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The story was far from over. The next chapters would be filled with calculated plans, fierce battles, and unexpected allies. Because sometimes, to reclaim your life, you must first face the darkest parts of yourself and those who sought to destroy you. After the storm of betrayal and the viral humiliation, I knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. But sitting in the ruins of my life, surrounded by shattered dreams and endless questions, I felt something stir inside me, a quiet, unyielding fire that refused to die. The first step was acceptance. No more denial. No more hoping Brandon would return to the man I once loved. I had to face the truth. This was a turning point, a fracture that could either destroy me or redefine me. I chose the latter. Rachel, my lawyer and longtime friend, was my anchor in the chaos. She laid out the legal battles waiting for me, contracts to cancel, financial commitments to untangle, and a messy fallout with the wedding venue, she was relentless but compassionate, reminding me that reclaiming control over my life meant fighting on every front. Jo, meanwhile, became more than just a cousin and maid of honor. She became my strategist. She knew social media like the back of her hand, and together with Kyle, we crafted a narrative. No longer would I be the girl abandoned at the altar. I would be the woman who stood tall amidst the ruins, who turned heartbreak into power. We began by addressing the viral video. Instead of hiding from it, we embraced it with honesty and vulnerability. I wrote a heartfelt blog post titled, "Not My Fault Rising from the Ashes of Betrayal," sharing my story, my pain, and my resolve. The post resonated far beyond my expectations, gathering thousands of shares and messages from people who saw their own struggles reflected in mine. It was the start of something bigger, a movement to reclaim dignity in the face of public shaming. I started receiving messages from women who had been betrayed, humiliated, and silenced, all reaching out to say, "Your story gave me strength." The online support was overwhelming, but also empowering. Every share, every comment was a brick in the foundation of my comeback. But the fight wasn't just external. Inside me, the wounds were deep and raw. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw traces of the woman I was before Brandon's betrayal, and the woman I was becoming, scarred but unbreakable. I had to learn to forgive myself for trusting, for loving, and for being vulnerable. That was the hardest part. Meanwhile, Brandon's world was unraveling. Rachel uncovered emails and messages revealing a trail of lies and manipulation not just to me, but to other clients and lovers. His coaching business was crumbling, sponsors pulled out, and former followers turned their backs. One night, as I sat in my apartment reviewing messages from supporters and legal documents from Rachel, a knock at the door startled me. Standing there was Brandon, gaunt, broken, a shadow of the man I once knew. He spoke of regret, lessons learned, and a desperate plea for another chance, but his words rang hollow. I had seen the truth beneath his mask. I met his eyes and said coldly, "If I were your last option, would you be here?" He had no answer. Closing the door, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was closure, not the fairy tale ending I once imagined, but a real one. I was free. But freedom came with its own battles. The public eye that had torn me apart now scrutinized every move I made. The fallout from the viral video affected my work, my relationships, my sense of self. Some days I felt stronger than ever. Others, crushed under the weight of humiliation. That's when the real test began, not fighting Brandon, but fighting to rebuild myself on my own terms. In the weeks and months that followed, I slowly began to reclaim my life. The viral video, once a symbol of my humiliation, transformed into a beacon of strength and resilience. The flood of messages from strangers, friends, and family reminding me that I was not alone carried me through the darkest nights. Rachel helped me navigate the legal labyrinth, ensuring that Brandon could not drag me through court battles or financial ruin. Jo, Kyle, and I strategized how to rebuild my reputation. Piece by piece, brick by brick, together. We started a small online series, sharing stories of heartbreak, betrayal, and most importantly, recovery. One evening, as I prepared for a live broadcast, I received an email from a young woman named Emily. She wrote to thank me for sharing my story, saying it gave her the courage to walk away from an abusive relationship. I realized then that my pain had become a catalyst for healing, not just for me, but for others. The power of vulnerability, I discovered, was profound. But healing isn't linear. There were days when the scars felt fresh, the memories sharp as ever. When friends would ask how I was really doing, I'd smile and say I'm fine. But inside, the echo of betrayal lingered. Trust, once shattered, is a slow and painstaking process to rebuild. Kyle became my rock. His unwavering support reminded me of the family bond that had survived the storm. Our late-night talks often drifted from strategy to life, laughter to tears. I saw in him a reflection of my own resilience, and it fueled my determination to never let this define me. The public's fascination with the runaway groom saga gradually faded, replaced by new viral stories and headlines. But for me, the journey was far from over. I continued to rebuild my career, this time with a deeper sense of purpose, helping others facing personal crises find their voice. One unexpected twist came when a popular podcast invited me as a guest speaker. Sharing my story with a wider audience was terrifying but liberating. The episode received overwhelming support, and offers came pouring in to collaborate on projects focused on emotional healing and empowerment. Despite all this progress, Brandon remained a ghost in the background, a reminder of the past I could never fully erase. Then, one day, out of nowhere, he appeared again, not with apologies or pleas, but with a quiet acknowledgement of his failures and a wish to move on. I listened without anger or bitterness, feeling a strange sense of closure. I had won my battle not through revenge or spite, but by reclaiming my story and living it on my terms. Reflecting on everything, I realized the greatest lesson was about self-worth, about understanding that no one has the right to define you by their mistakes or betrayals. That sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away, but it's also the most powerful. And so as I look to the future, I do so with open eyes and a steady heart, because the woman who stood alone at the altar that day has risen stronger, wiser, and free. This journey taught me that true strength isn't in perfection, but in embracing imperfection. The scars we carry don't diminish us. They make us who we are. And, sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another.